Okay, so good morning. Let's start with a roll call so we can track quorum and attendance. So getting my notes ready. So we have myself, and I guess I'll go in order on the. So part of the Tsc, I guess on my top left, I see Drew. Benin, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Bar. So I'll split. And everybody's welcome, of course, but for the, I'm tracking also the attendance of the Tsc. Mache.
Hello.
Hello. Jamak. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Daniel. Mandy. Willie.
Hey, Julian.
And Kader. Also, feel free to correct me if I'm mispronouncing your name. You know, it's like better to take it early rather than hello. And otherwise, I'm going to pronounce it the same way every time. Welcome, everyone. So probably we should do a quick round of introduction. And since we haven't seen each other in a while, and let's go around and quickly, you know, who we are and why we're interested in participating to this. So I guess if we go in order, Drew, you're at top left.
All right, hey folks. Yeah, my name's Drew. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Fishtown Analytics. We make open core data modeling software called DBT. And we're joined by Bar on our team, who is heading up our metadata initiatives. The kind of TLDR is we really think metadata is a powerful way for people to observe what's happening in their DBT deployments and data warehouses. And so we're pretty interested in what's happening around OpenLineage and thinking a lot about the metadata we like capture and expose.
I'll go next since that was a great introduction for me too. Thank you, Drew. I'm Bar. Like Drew mentioned, I'm the product manager at Fishtown Analytics, focused on specifically on metadata.
Maciej?
Hey, I work in Getting Data, which is a big data focused consultancy, and yeah, we work with Julian and rest of DataKin folks on development of markers, and we're interested in lineage and metadata, as many of our clients are also interested in those topics.
And Jamak?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamak. My day job is head of emerging technologies for a consultancy company called ThoughtWorks, and we have big and small and medium data clients. My night job is I founded the concept of data mesh as a result of working with our clients, and I'm evangelizing it, implementing it, talking and writing about it. And I think having an open protocol for observability of a distributed data processing, framework or ecosystem is a big piece to data mesh. So I'm here to just kind of bring my data mesh lens and kind of make sure that what we're building can be deployed and applied in a slightly different configuration than a typical pipeline and warehouse or pipeline and lake. And I'm super excited about this initiative. I mean, yeah, all the force be with you, Julian, for starting this.
Thank you. Daniel?
So I'm a former DataKit employee working on all the lineage stuff that they do. I'm currently building a database currently, and a lot of the problems of lineage are things that we're trying to tackle.
Mandy?
Oops, should have been more already. Okay, so I am the lead of an open source project called Ageria. And Ageria's role is to basically enable metadata exchange between heterogeneous tools in a distributed environment. And lineage is obviously one of our subject areas. And so having an initiative that actually volunteers lineage information rather than having to go and hunt for it is an excellent extension to the sort of open space around metadata.
Willie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Willie. I'm the co-creator of Marquez, and I also work alongside Julian and a few others at Datakin. So Datakin is a data lineage startup. And I've been involved in the OpenLineage standard for, I guess, since the beginning. And I'm here kind of excited to see what other opinions people have and kind of learn from you and see where we could evolve the general spec in general. So I'm excited to be here.
Michael?
Hey, yeah, so I am also a Datakin employee, work alongside Willie and Julian, and used to work with Danny when he was here. Yeah, I've been working in the data pipeline space for about 10 years, working on it both as a kind of practitioner building analytic systems and then also building platform systems. So I've seen a lot of problems that could have been solved with collecting and storing lineage. I've built part of the solution before, but I've never seen an end-to-end like holistic approach to it. So I'm really excited to, see that problem solved end-to-end.
And Kedar?
Hi, I'm a software consultant working on distributed systems, and I'm interested in looking how OpenLineage can help to bring more monitoring and observability piece into context. Yeah.
And Victor?
Hey everyone. I'm Victor, and I am one of the co-founders at DataBand.ai, a data and pipeline monitoring company. So I've joined late, and I learned about this meeting really recently, but I'm really interested in this domain, and especially in the open part of the lineage problem. We see lineage issue coming, in many of our customers, and we realize the challenge of, integrating within every system. So I'm excited about this project, and as we discussed, with Julian a few times ago, that really looking for ways to contribute to it.
Nice, welcome. Yeah, this is the first meeting, the first monthly meeting. So we just getting started. I know we've been talking about having it for a little bit, and it is finally happening. So OpenLineage has been accepted by the LFAI and data, and so some of the first thing. So what I put on the agenda for today is start with the introduction. I've listed how to be part of the discussion, and I'm going to paste the links here as part of the LFAI, the infrastructure they provide, and how to communicate. Let me open the chat. Here we go. And so there's a few links. Discuss the project governance. So as part of the LFAI and data, there's a standard governance document that I have put on the invitation as well, that I shared through Google Doc. So I'd like to review that with you. And and finish with discuss short and medium term roadmap items. The other thing that, so that's kind of the agenda I prepared, but of course, we should also add any item that people on the call would like to add to this. So besides how to communicate, the project charter and governance, and short and medium term roadmap, did you have anything in particular you wanted to talk about?
Maybe Julian, if you can help us to scope this conversation here, what's in, what's out, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so the goal of the monthly meeting is also to help make decisions as part of the technical steering committee on the direction of the project. And so out of this document, of this initial meeting, I think one out is make sure we on the right Slack channel, we're on the right mailing list, and we know when there's a discussion about some decision happening, we should be able to reach out to each other, you know, and all be part of the conversation on an equal footing. Second deliverable as part of the project charter is make sure we all agree on the governance model and we're all aware of the governance model of the project. And the last item is talking about priorities. So as you know, the way I think an open source project progresses is we agree on a general direction and different swim lanes, so to speak, that makes sense for the project. And then each of those, they make progress based on who's the most interested or most need a feature, as long as we agree on the general direction. And then different groups or different people can drive different areas. So I can, as part of, you know, when I talk about short and medium term items, I can talk about from my personal perspective, things, you know, we at Dedekind are going to start pushing for. But I'm interested, you know, it's all about being collaborative and making sure this is all mutually useful for the community, right? This kind of, what are other things that other people care about? What are they interested in having an opinion about, or having, or potentially driving the definition of a certain spec or a certain implementation of something. So the way OpenLineage is set up, it's also is to make it easy to have separate conversation on different topics. For example, you know, how we define schemas versus how we define data quality, how we define other, you know, lineage in DBT or lineage in streaming system. So it's kind of the last when I talk about roadmap, it's kind of last maybe capturing more what people care about and what timeline they're thinking about for making certain areas progress. But before we get into those things, maybe let's quickly review the charter and governance. It's kind of, I know this is kind of like, this is important because it's kind of help, this is how we are going to make decisions or things evolve, or like elect new members to this group, to the Tsc and so on. But it's just, I think, an important initial piece. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think as we go through the process, whenever you think like, okay, she's asking or questioning things that is way out of the scope, as we go through it, you can kind of nudge us, I suppose.
Yes. So first, the first item is communication. So I put in the chat for the Zoom, there's an OpenLineage Slack, obviously. The LFAI and Data Foundation also provide mailing lists. So there's a technical discuss. I linked here the Tsc mailing list. I think all the members of the Tsc should have this mailing list on. This is a public mailing list, right? So The goal is to enable discussion that the TSC should be paying attention to, and for everyone to be able to follow along those discussions or chime in. And there's a Confluence page. So let me share my screen. So LFI and data provide Confluence page that I linked here. So of course, since it's just been created, you see it's very sparse, but that's where we would publish the meeting notes, links to a recording of the meeting, and so on. So for now, it just has some, I put a little mission statement here, and that's it. Feel free to contribute, and we can use the Slack or the mailing list to coordinate on things. So quick round off. One thing I was wondering, I know like recently communication has been shifting towards Slack and stuff, and historically probably open source projects have been using mailing list. So quick round off, I wanted to check who prefers mailing list versus email. And so maybe do we want to do a round of raising hands? So who likes Slack better? I guess I like, so 3 and 4. So Jean-Marc, is that thinking or is that, I'm not sure.
I mean, for different types of conversations, right? I think if you have, right? Like if you have you're planning on some sort of a monthly, like a, summary or something that needs a little bit more, it's okay if we have the email response etiquette of taking some time. I think email, but if it's just sharing and then don't care if people don't catch up or don't care if people don't respond, there's like a Slack etiquette of communication. So I just wonder, like perhaps it's different types of communications, those are those.
So let me see. So you're saying like Slack is better for getting a quick response and maybe things that are more ephemeral discussions. And like email is more for like, if we have a design document and we get to persistent discussion or like keep track of where we at, probably email is better. Or like you want to make sure people follow through.
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I was going to say, I just think Slack is also useful where you've got people watching the community rather than it being an email that, they can have you have a sort of announcement board. But I agree with the other two sort of divisions between, just has anybody got, can anybody get this working type question, appeal for help to versus, this is the current release status or whatever. But there are probably other places for those things too.
So you probably favor email for technical discussions, like on like reviews or things like that?
I think reviews should be done in GitHub.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably, so favoring GitHub for tickets and pull requests and things like that for reviews and tracking, getting to a consensus on the topic, and the mailing list. So what would you use the mailing list for?
Announcements, main announcements that you have. If you're planning to have, some sort of a summary, like a newsletter of some sort of summary of, these are the things that have happened that are important to pay attention to.
Okay.
And I think when we get to the project charter, I'll talk about the security mailing list as well. That's obviously a place for people to contact us in private.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that I actually dislike about Slack is the fact that it's a bit harder to maintain history, though. So one of the things that I think it'd be useful for, I think that having kind of online, more synchronous communication on Slack for discussions makes a lot of sense, but then capturing those and making sure that they are trackable on mailing lists, because mailing lists are great for going back and reviewing history of things.
That's a very good
So-
point, particularly since LFAI doesn't pay for Slack, so it does only have a limited life. Yeah.
Okay, so like notes would go to the mailing list, and decisions, and then more widely, important consensus building should happen on GitHub and the mailing list. That makes sense.
I think any decision that it needs to be contextualized with the code or with the spec, that makes sense to be on the GitHub.
Decision making. Okay. So in that sense, I think it's important to be on Slack and on the mailing list, and then the last thing I didn't link in there is, of course, the GitHub project. Okay, that makes sense. So I think there's a good consensus here, and let me open the. So I linked in the invite. Does everyone have access to this link? I'm sending it in the chat right now. And this is our technical charter. And basically that defines mainly how you elect new members to this group, how you elect committers, and so on. So the technical steering committee, the initial membership is defined as part of the application to the LFAI and data. So that's on the LFAI GitHub. I'm posting it here. You can review it. So most people are in the room. I think a couple of people were not able to join and mentioned they'll join next time. In particular, Ryan Blue and James Campbell are missing today. And so that's the initial TSC. So they're initially, so it's a technical steering committee. They're also the initial committers of the project. We have a contributing file in the project that capture this direction on how to start contributing. So there's this notion of TSC committers and contributors. Contributors is anybody contributing to the project in general. So it's not something you get elected to. That's something you just are by contributing. Committers is people who specifically have commit access to the project, and so can approve pull requests and so on. And the TSC is the voting group that that can add new member to the CSC and kind of generally make high-level decisions about the project. And in particular, also responsible for other aspects like security and so on. So that's kind of the right. Participation is open to anyone, so anyone can become a committer. You can become a contributor, then become a committer and become a TSC member, as long as, of course, you respect the spirit of the project. And so there are a few, I'm not going to go in all the details, but there are a lot of different aspects that the TSC may establish: workflow, procedure, commercial. So that we can define a lot of procedures if we need to, and so we can make a lot of amendment to this document as a TSC, and the TSC votes on those things if it's necessary to add new rules or not. Personally, I think we probably don't need too many written rules, but that's why the list that we may establish. So we may elect a chair who will preside over our meetings and kind of official facilitator. And the chair is the primary communication contact. So the Tsc are responsible for coordinating the technical direction, approving proposals, organizing, creating subcommittees, appointing representative, approving and implementing policies. So it's kind of basically generically amending the procedures on how we run the project. And also coordinate with the LFAI on any events they organize or communication they organize and so on. So the voting is consensus based. So it's a majority of the attendance of the meeting. And there is a quorum if too many people are missing in the meeting. And if we can't reach a decision, we can reach out to LFAI to help, break a tie or something if really we end up in a conflict. But I really don't foresee such a situation. But it's good to have a tiebreaker in the end when if something happens. Right, so we have to have a code of conduct. The LFAI has policies. So really standard open source project governance really in there. There's a code of conduct to prepare for that. We have a code of conduct on the GitHub for OpenLineage. There's some how we amend policies. We must allow open participation, communication must be public and so on discussion. Right, community assets. So the LFAI owns the project name, the open source, the social media accounts and so on. And so basically what we're doing is we make LFAI admin on any of those things, like on as a Slack, the Twitter account and so on. And so that's kind of part of the governance of the project, that the project is the LFAI owns the name and the project and so on. Right, and so then the last thing is like everything should be Apache 2 license. There's some rules about how things are licensed, documentation with Creative Commons and code in Apache 2 and so on. And there's some, like any open source foundation, there's some definition on how people contribute. And this is kind of typical legal foundation mechanism for dealing with avoiding lawsuits, or if to avoid like legal problems linked to software and contribution that may not be ownership of people. And that's pretty much it. So so this is basically the standard charter that the Linux Foundation is providing, and that will govern the project. So the only thing I completed is to add a mission for the project, which is the same I put on the OpenLineage page. So any comments of this, or should we just go in and this is good?
I'm gonna throw a wrench at you, Julian. I think the general charter is good. I'm curious. I'm being nitpicky around language because, and as you know, because I'm thinking, okay, beyond pipelines, is this going to be relevant, right? If we start changing our language and call this distributed data processing something else than pipelines, like with data mesh. So I wonder in your kind of mission statement, there are a few words I'm picking on. One is lineage, the other one is metadata, and the other word is pipelines. I just wonder if some of this can be either made a bit more specific or a bit more vague. So with pipelines, is it complex, maybe distributed data processing systems or something along those lines? So you don't narrow yourself to pipelines.
That makes sense. So this is a first version of the mission. So I put something here so that we start from something and it's not blank. your feedback is very welcome. So I can, do you have access to the document? Can you click on the link on the chat and make sure you can comment on it? So I see Michael, you seem to have access. So if you see the Google link, let me,
yeah, I can comment. All good.
Okay. So what process do you want to do? I think this makes a lot of sense, right? So I put a first mission statement. And yes, I have a tendency to skew everything towards pipelines. But if this term is not proper, yes, we should iterate on that. So you mentioned the words you talked about.
Lineage metadata pipeline. I just say something and you can all throw sharp objects at me. One is metadata. I roll my eyes inside my head when I hear it because it's just so vague and so encompassing. And what does it really mean? So, and I know in your particular, like OpenLineage, if I zoom out across this vast ocean of metadata, you are talking about tracing the execution of data processing, right, across the space. So I wonder if that can be made a bit more specific, because data metadata could mean a lot of different things, right? And then I also wonder, and I'm just curious, I mean, this project is called OpenLineage, but I'm also curious, we can keep lineage as is, but I feel lineage is also becoming a placeholder word for tracing a lot of different types of connectivity and interconnection. Lineage could be interconnectivity of the schema changes, or in this particular case is the execution of the data operators or jobs, as you call them, on the data. So maybe lineage metadata together as a phrase can be made a bit more specific. Maybe it's the lineage of, execution or data processing across a distributed ecosystem or something like that. In the other world, in the operational world, we say tracing and people understand what kind of tracing means, because it's always tracing of the execution and transactions.
Although tracing often is focused on functional execution. So this function, whereas here what we're saying is this is where this data came from, and it tends to cut across the functional execution.
Yes, it's the functional execution as well as the output of that function and input of that function, right? Mm-hmm. In this case, so it's input, function, output. Mm-hmm. And I don't suggest necessarily we just say tracing, but I do feel we could be a little bit more specific as lineage, to just clarify lineage metadata. What metadata?
I do like that idea. Yeah, I do like that idea. I think to be able to say it's tracking and tracing the data movement and transformation between throughout complex distributed data processing or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can, I would suggest that we refine the vocabulary offline for this. I think it makes sense. So I see what you're saying. So so on one end, collect lineage metadata is a little too general, and probably we want to be more specific. And at the same time, complex pipeline is probably too specific, and we want this to be a little more generic. So that makes sense. I think, yes, I didn't intend this document needed a mission defined here and scope. I filled that in, but we definitely should refine that, and that makes a lot of sense. So let's document it, let's comment and discuss in the document, and we can finalize this mission statement. Okay. So, and yes, this is a standard document. So the only thing I filled in is the mission, so we can refine that. And so if you're, and I think this is really the same governance that was proposed for Marquez, for example, and that we can be using. Okay, so next step, I guess, is general roadmap for the project. So probably it would be interesting, I think, is to, and I guess we should probably, one thing we can do is to start with collaborating on a simple document. I'm just going to take notes here as we discuss, and if people want to, just to make it a little more interactive. Right, I just kind of shared note-taking process rather than an official document. In the end, you know, this should end up on the OpenLineage GitHub right here. I started starting projects to keep track of improvement to OpenLineage, and so really this is how I think where we should track progress of what we're doing and where progress is made. And as part of that, but just to have a collaborative notes on the roadmap, I was wondering if people wanted to do a round of what they care about. I can start probably to make things easier. So I think some of the goals short term is to release OpenLineage 0.1. Right. For currently, we have published the spec. Marquez as an implementation of it, but there's no official release of OpenLineage yet. And so we should make an official release that would include clients to make it easy. So we have in progress, there's a Python and a Java client, which I think cover 80% or so of what people are using to do data transformations. And another aspect, I think, is make it really easy to create custom facets. So, you know, you have the facets that are part of the core spec and the facet that can be specific to certain areas. Oh, and please log in to access the document so that we can see, like right now I see Anonymous Frog, and it's fine, so please edit the document, but please log in or something so that we can track who does what. Go ahead.
So what do you intend to have within OpenLineage project? Sorry, it's just a stupid basic question. Because you have Marquez as an implementation, right? So then how do you decide what's in OpenLineage with regard to implementation and what's not?
Yes, so actually as part, that's a good point. So I was going to get to that point next. So starting with the client, make it easy to write open custom facet. And the last point is to move the integrations from Marquez to OpenLineage. So the idea is to have all the data collection part of OpenLineage. And as part of that, import into the OpenLineage project. So currently in Marquez, you have an OpenLineage integration for Airflow, BigQuery, Snowflake, Postgres, Spark. And I'm probably forgetting, Great Expectation is in progress and DBT is in progress. And it's too bad we lost the DBT people because that's where this was getting interesting more. So this would move into, so if you look at the Marquez project, there's still a bunch of stuff that's related to collecting lineage, and that would move into the OpenLineage project. And so OpenLineage is really, it's really a very similar scope to what OpenTelemetry is saying. If you look at the charter for OpenTelemetry, eventually the goal is to have all the integration and writing to OpenTelemetry in other projects. But in the meantime, there are a certain number of integration in the OpenTelemetry project itself that get the information and to publish it. And so it's really the same idea for OpenLineage in that sense of.
But if you want to have like a full end-to-end implementation of this, so that the clients can push the lineage information, and then somebody can kind of go observe them and query them and process them, that would require markers plus OpenLineage, or OpenLineage in itself can have the basic information to do that full end-to-end flow.
So OpenLineage is really the collection aspect, right? And then if you want to analyze the data, you have multiple options. So then you would use one of the OpenLineage implementation. So Marquez is one metadata repository and lineage repository that you can use to traverse the lineage. Egeria obviously is going to implement the OpenLineage collection as well. So that will be another option, right? So the idea of OpenLineage is really to focus on the collection aspect. So that's where it has the clients, the integration, the spec, and then the storage, the analysis is up to other projects. So Marquez is the reference implementation. So today, you'll have an end-to-end use case with Marquez, but obviously, depending on your use case, the way you store it and you analyze it is different, right? So people use different.
Is it worth us just having a Kafka, something simple like Kafka in OpenLineage, so that if people are testing their integration with OpenLineage, they can just be monitoring the Kafka topic, and then someone else can be testing. So you just create a disconnect between the people consuming and the people who are producing the lineage. It just makes, gives you an easy test hook for demos and things like that. You may not run like that, but you actually might. It might be a way to have a disconnected operation around lineage.
Yeah, so there are a couple of topics.
I just wanted to say that I definitely agree that Kafka client is needed. Maybe not in 0.1, but I've seen a strong demand of a strong amount of organizations that basically communicate internally with Kafka and would be also interested in this. So,
if I understood Mandy, I think she was talking about the other end, not so much. I mean, sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth, but the way I understood it was that if I just get OpenLineage and I don't have Marquez or anything else, I want to quickly start collecting and I want to just start seeing things popping out the other end. What's the best way of just to show a demo, some sort of a sync that is maybe it's a null sync?
But also you might just sort of say you've got a series of Spark jobs they're running, they're producing OpenLineage. If they produce it into Kafka, then you might have a number of people, of different technologies pulling different subsets of it. So you might actually run in production with that distributed model, rather than, only publishing to a specific repository when it's running. And if we have the client interface properly defined, you can have a client interface in front of Kafka, or it could be Marquez, or it could be Egeria, or it could be something completely different. So the producers don't care. And then if the consumers also have a client interface that means that, maybe they're connecting to Kafka, maybe they're connecting to an HTTP, so that they need a definition of the endpoint, I suppose.
Yes. So as part of the spec, it's meant to be not tied to HTTP. So currently, the only implementation there is sending those events over HTTP as a post. But it's meant to really support different backends. So in the project, we started calling that a backend. Like I think in OpenTelemetry, you have the same notion of backend, that the information can be written to different things. So to that end, Maciej, you were commenting on HTTP clients, but I think the clients should be the same, and it's more like the backend is configurable in that sense. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It's just a question of naming here.
Okay.
But I would like distinguish here if you want to have Kafka part or even the bucket part in 0.1.
Yeah, so I guess actually that's a good point. I think we should decouple probably the scoping of the near-term goals. So I think what you're saying is we want to have a 0.1 as soon as possible. And it sounds like what you want is to make sure we don't delay it too much. Is that your thinking?
Well, their regular or rather frequent releases are probably better than waiting a long time to get
that makes
everything
sense.
once. As long as we're not like rushing the overall spec of the events, right? That's the like more long-term. That's would have long-term. I mean, it could cause problems if we did not think something well here, right?
Yes. So I think what I think what you're saying is for really the blocker for releasing OpenLineage 0.1 is finalize the spec and any incompatible changes we might still want to do. And then adding a Kafka backend is not something that can be added. That's not breaking compatibility and so on. And I think this makes a lot of sense, right? So so I'm changing this for kind of, we should have a 0.1 release soon. So we need to finalize the spec for that. And then if we get in a good cadence of making frequent releases and adding to this, I think in the near-term goals, making sure we have good clients, make it easy to create custom facets is what I was listing, but probably enable those backends is higher priority. And import the Marquez integration is also an important thing to make the project really usable in that sense. So that you have an end-to-end package where you can collect lineage, see it in Kafka, for example, or using Marquez or using Egeria or something else. And then you can look at your lineage. Does that make sense?
I was on mute. It is almost as if there's multiple specs here. There's the spec for the producer in terms of what's the payload and how you describe it. But there are also APIs for the client in terms of how you get it up and running and then you push out your payload. And then it's almost like there's a consumer spec as well. So that when you build a backend, it supports the front end and both the producer and the consumer interface.
That makes sense. And actually, yeah, the consumer has typically a looser contract than the producer, because the producer contract kind of enforces, you're writing as if this version of the spec and so on. And the consumer typically want to be looser and to be forward compatible and want to be able to accept, more recent version of the spec and things like that. And I think this is kind of how it happened. Like if we look at the Marquez implementation of OpenLineage, it uses a looser spec that can accept any type of facet, not restricting to a specific version of the spec. And this is important contract. Okay. Anything else in the core? The other aspect is integrations. And so there's a couple of discussion happening. So there's we can start talking about the list of integrations that we like to see, but before we do that, I think this is a good initial short-term goal.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. And so in the integration, from our perspective, things we've been pushing through is really warehouses. So you see BigQuery, Snowflake, Redshift, Spark, like schedulers, and starting with Airflow at the moment. But others, I know that people are talking about Prefect, for example. I don't know if we put DBT in that, DBT in that category. And really capturing this lineage, BI, so Looker, Tableau. And then it starts like, that's kind of what we've been focusing on. And you'll see, like, again, Mandy, or I guess Jean-Marc was mentioning, it's kind of very pipeline oriented and transformation. So I was wondering, like, of course, oh, so another one is, so that would be in the project, right? And I think some of the goals is we also have discussions on helping Snowflake produce OpenLineage, or have Spark produce OpenLineage, rather than having an OpenLineage integration that go analyze those things and publish this. So we have 4 more minutes before the end of the meeting. So that's kind of the initial discussion. I think we can use this document to kind of keep having an asynchronous discussion over that. Yeah. Any other comments?
I'd like to advocate for a potential integration down the road, like Flink, Apache Flink, because we're trying to do like combination, streaming or query side of things, and Flink has a couple, like stream processing items as well as like batch job things. So interesting.
That makes sense. I think I would put Flink in the same category as Spark.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what I call this category. It's kind of like programmatic API for data
processing engines, maybe.
Processing engines.
I think
I'd throw Apache being in that list as well.
Itself. Processing engine.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Julian, maybe we add another category in terms of just documentation. It's something I know we've been working on, but do we add just some docs on how you define facets, sort of user-defined custom facets, and maybe even how to get started with OpenLineage, whether it's Kafka or using Marquez as the implementation? Because I think people want to see it in action, and I think that'd be good to have on the roadmap.
Yeah. Another thing that I would add in there is, so talking about custom facets, allowing users to add their custom facets to like the existing integrations. So, if they want to attach a facet to a Spark job, or a data set that has been defined in their Spark job, an easy way to do that.
Okay, yeah, so it's not just documentation in this, there's kind of.
I expect over time we'll have the contribution guide will include how you bring a new facet into the spec. So you've got the contribution to actually change the underlying, the core part of OpenLineage, but the other will be the contribution of the facets.
Yeah, that's an important point, Mandy. Sort of like, if you are going to publish a facet, does it live in OpenLineage, or do you kind of create a different repo and define your facets there, especially for something like Spark or DBT? where do those facets live? And that's something we've been talking about and trying to clarify. So it's a good point to bring up.
Okay.
Also,
so
maybe one more point, like making sure that the same data set produced by like two engines would have same schema, same custom facets, like consistency amongst different integrations, right?
Yeah, I think if a facet starts being used in more than one integration, then it's maybe not a custom facet anymore, right? It should become a core facet. But that's
maybe some distinguish somehow facets that are like core for some particular integration, like maybe BigQuery integrations. Writing to BigQuery from Spark and from like Python client has a lot in common, but maybe treat like facets that can be used amongst different warehouses, different processing engines, kind of different.
That makes sense. I think we should dig in. So we don't have time today to kind of dig into that particular problem, but I listed it. So it probably would worth like refining this use case. I think like today you can publish a custom facet and make your own definition, and we should refine that. Okay, so I listed it. We can. So we run out of time for today, and we'll have another meeting in a month. So we should keep discussing on the document in the meantime and use Slack to coordinate on those things. I will also make sure the OpenLineage roadmap project is up to date in GitHub. And then we can also start linking those tickets in the document and continue the discussions on those instead of in the Google Doc.
Is there anything else you need any help with specifically?
I think I could, if starting like cleaning up. So we have two topics we need to finish, like finishing the mission statement, finish kind of updating the roadmap. So if you want to update the wiki and kind of add more structure to it, I think that would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Is that the kind of thing? I think we need to kind of document a bit better the governance and the structure and for the decision-making aspect of things.
Yeah. Just as a proposal. Okay, fair enough. And I'd say the other thing I'll start doing probably in a month or so will be seeing how well the Ageria and the OpenLineage spec work together.
Yeah, so I suspect you'll be the consumer contract aspect of things. You'll have to probably, that's going to become a blocker or like a dependency on making things really clear as part of this. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. I will send the notes over to the mailing list, and we'll chat on Slack in the meantime, and this meeting will happen again in a month. And I think it will get more structure over time. This is the first meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Have a great day or a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.